One of my favorite moments, the motion picture Prisoners, we spoke about a little bit before. That very last chase scene when Detective Loki is driving to the hospital, we're shooting on a major boulevard in Atlanta. And if you look at the sequence, you will literally see just 100 cars, headlights back to back to back coming toward us, and they lit the scene for us.
Hi, and welcome back to StudioBinder Academy. I'm Brandon. Today we're speaking with Assistant Director Donald Sparks, whose previous work includes Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, Blade Runner 2049, Sicario, and many more. Don, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. So you've worked on a lot of my favorite movies. So first of all, thank you. But what drew you into filmmaking?
It's interesting. I didn't know much about filmmaking as a career as a child, but what I really enjoyed were advertising. I enjoyed commercials. For whatever reason, the commercials were exciting to me. And my initial field of study was advertising. And that kind of led into production, post-production, and then eventually feature film production.
Okay. All right. And was there anything that kind of drew you specifically towards the directing route?
Well, as an assistant director, actually, during my work in post-production, I was working with a director, a music video director, a guy named Jerry Kramer, very prolific director, producer, and I was working as the post-production manager at the facility he was part owner of. And I actually was leaving that facility to go work at another post facility. And Jerry took me to lunch my last day working there. And he said, Don, if you ever think about it, I think you'd be a really good AD. And it wasn't anything that had crossed my mind before, but just through another set of circumstances, I ended up going to the other company, which was then bought out by another company 3 months later. And they were like, we don't want the facility. We just want the library. So you guys are kind of redundant. So you're all going to be laid off. So I called Jerry and I go, hey, are you serious about that AD thing? And he said, absolutely. And 2 weeks after I got laid off from that particular job, I started working as a production assistant on jobs that Jerry was doing. And that allowed me to start gathering my days to join the Directors Guild.
Wow, that's an amazing story. You hear it all the time. When one door closes, another door opens, and it sounds like that's exactly your story there. So that's amazing.
Yeah, I was very fortunate. I've had a number of very fortunate events throughout my career with people mentoring me or giving me the opportunity or opening doors for me to learn the craft as an assistant director. And, from there, I just kind of took the ball and ran.
Definitely. Yeah, we spoke with a cinematographer before, and it's a lot of the industry is a lot of who a lot is what but it is a lot of who and it building those connections. I feel like in my own career, I've been able to build connections with other people that's led to other jobs, and it's just having that network I feel is very, very important.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you start out, what you're looking for are opportunities. They're not always going to be exactly what you want, but you have to remember that working in this business, whatever department or discipline you work under, it's a craft, and you have to be able to learn that craft. You have to be able to practice that craft. So it may not be a big name movie that you're working on, but if you have the opportunity to experience, learn, contribute, you are, mastering your craft, which is what you would hope to do as a filmmaker.
Absolutely. Now, could you describe the role of an AD for someone that might not know?
Well, the assistant director, it's tough to put this in words because in the simplest form, we're the managers, but in the most complex form, we're actually kind of the central processing unit. We are constantly taking in information from all of our departments that we work with, and we are the hub of communication. So we take in the information, we process the information, we distribute the information. We are responsible for setting up, planning, managing the daily activities of the film crew. So it's the constant, back and forth a very dynamic environment where you're constantly communicating with people, taking in information, processing that information, and acting upon that information, making plans, making backup plans, et cetera, to help you, make the movie.
Absolutely, absolutely. And are there any like main responsibilities you would say? Would it be, the scheduling would be one of the top priorities?
Oh, absolutely. Everything for us starts with the schedule. The first thing, in the pre-production process, we get the screenplay from the director or the producer or whomever, and we start breaking it down. We start, our process of breaking down the screenplay, understanding all of the elements, the dynamics of the picture, and you're putting in place a document that's going to be shared with everybody essentially on the crew as what is your shooting plan.
Could you speak to the responsibilities during production of a first AD?
Well, again, at this point during production, the pre-production process, you cast a very broad net. You're trying to capture all the information you can, distribute all the information that you can, and you're honing that down to a very fine point, aiming towards your shooting day. So once you get to that shooting day, you already essentially have walked through that day, or you've shot that day because you've had sequence meetings, you've had tech surveys, you've walked the sets, you've got storyboards for references, whatever the case may be. You're driving everything to the detail of that particular shooting day.
And what would you say the best qualities that one could have to be a first AD?
I think a lot of it has to do with communicating. And communicating is not only talking to people, it's listening to people. Because, you work with a very talented group of individuals, artists, technicians, who actually, have a lot of experience in what they're doing. And, as you're communicating with them and taking in information, sharing that information, that helps you refine your production plan, helps you understand the needs and concerns of other departments. One of the primary jobs I feel as an assistant director is for me to be able to put everybody on the crew in the position to do their best work.
Yeah, I totally agree. I've done a little work as an AD, and nothing on to your level, but yeah, definitely communicating is key. I feel like in any type of relationship, whether it be work, relation, love, whatever. But yeah, communication. Being able to communicate with your department heads, your director, and keep that set flowing. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And again, these people your department heads are professionals. They bring a lot to the party themselves, a lot of skills and experience that, I can use as a tool to help me plan the production.
Now, as far as the collaborative process, do you have a specific kind of working relationship that you'd like to have with a director whenever you're first ADing for them?
In the perfect world, I always tell myself, if I could climb into the director's head and see the picture through his or her eyes, that would be the perfect situation, because I want to be able to understand everything, every subtlety, every nuance that the director is aiming for in their storytelling. So in terms of the collaborative approach, again, starting with the screenplay, once I get the screenplay, I start breaking it down. As I start breaking it down, there are questions that I have that I'm going to ask the director. It may be regarding tone. It may be regarding a particular music drop that they're going to have behind the scene. Again, helping me understand what the tone of the scene is. As we set background, if we understand what the tone is, we can help to accentuate the picture. But again, with the director, it's a lot of back and forth, a lot of questions, making sure that he or she all of the parameters, all of the priorities that they have for the picture are being expressed, are being met. And the collaboration with the director involves so many other people, because the director also has to interact with all of their department heads. So as part of that collaboration, when those meetings are happening with your director of photography or your production designer or your costume designer, I'm just kind of a fly on the wall, and I'm taking notes so that I understand, as this creative process is happening, what the goals are, what we're aiming for. So many details are discussed in those meetings, and I'm the one that's tracking and making sure that when we get there on the day, the director gets what he or she had asked for. And if there's any sort of questions that need to be answered, that those questions are being sent to the right department so that we can get the results that we want.
Now, as far as the pre-production process, I know every production can be different. Is there an average amount of time that pre-production usually takes?
Not particularly. Everything is typically geared toward what the parameters of the project are. I would say if you were doing a very straightforward romantic comedy, a drama that's not that complex in terms of stunts or effects or anything like that, the typical prep period for a first AD would be about 8 weeks. But if you're doing something much more elaborate, like Blade Runner 2049, Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, I believe my prep period on those pictures were somewhere between 16 and 20 weeks. And that's just because of the complexity of the picture and how much world building we have to do prior to the time that we roll camera.
Gotcha. Yeah, I can definitely see, for those bigger features, the world building, the set dressing and everything. Yeah, there would be a lot that would go into that.
Absolutely.
And now as far as your process, where do you like to start? As far as the pre-production process?
Well, again, it starts with the screenplay. I start breaking that down. I typically have some sort of an idea of how many days we are trying to accomplish that movie in. The producer, the director, someone above me is going to say, okay, we are budgeted for 40 days. Can we do this picture in 40 days? So after I go through the breakdown and I start making the schedule, I'm trying to fit it into the parameters that I've been given as far as that's concerned. And those parameters are constantly changing. You're talking about when the actors are cast, you may have somebody that's only available on certain days. As you go through the pre-production process and you're picking your locations, some of those locations may only be available on certain days. So, these parameters are constantly coming in and shaping your schedule and your pre-production process. But part of the other part of the pre-production process is calendaring your pre-production period. So if you have 6 weeks or 8 weeks or 16 weeks or whatever the case may be, you start to plug in dates into that overall calendar. So you have an idea of where, the tent poles are set in terms of what you need to accomplish as you move towards the first day of principal photography. Now, in the typical pre-production period, your last 2 weeks are always taken up. That last 2-week period, your cast is coming into town. So the director's starting to have rehearsal time, meeting time with the cast. You're going to go out. Your entire crew is probably hired at that point. So you're going to start doing camera tests. You're going to start doing technical surveys. You're going to have a production meeting. You may have a table read. So that last 2 weeks of your prep period is really packed. So you kind of pencil those dates in, you back up from there. When are we going to location scout? How do I get the director and the director of photography out to the locations we want to shoot so that they can shot list or storyboard on those practical locations? Do we need to do any advanced camera tests? You take a picture like Wakanda Forever, and there was a huge water element to that. So part of our testing period was to test the costumes in the water environment and see how they performed in the water as opposed to just on dry land. So there's all sorts of little things that you're always planning for during the prep period. And again, when you put it out on a calendar, see what you have to accomplish. That's what kind of drives your days.
Wow, that's so interesting. I would have never thought of, having a day to test costumes in the water, but it makes so much sense.
Absolutely. You have to put these, not only the costumes, the props. There may be a prop that is being manufactured that you actually want to see on camera. You don't want to get there on the day that you shoot it for the first time and realize that on camera it
It
doesn't look the
thinks,
same
or
way.
yeah.
Yeah, or the color doesn't pop the way that you hoped it did. So as you're marching through your prep period, you are just taking stock of everything you need to have ready by the time you shoot. You may be making your own picture cars. You may be manufacturing set dressing. If you're doing a picture again, like 2049, you're not walking to, a store down the street and buying futuristic furniture. All of that stuff has to be manufactured. So you work with your set decorating department, you work with your art department, and they will give you their timelines. I need X amount of time to build this prop. I need X amount of time to build this furniture. And you're plugging that into your calendar so that you can look and see, does that play in the first week of production? Does that play in the 10th week of production? And that kind of drives, again, how you set up your overall prep schedule.
Absolutely. Yeah, that makes total sense. I see, you always hear filmmaking's a huge collaborative medium, and until you really get into the details like this, you don't realize how much, goes in and out every single day, every single second. Like, time counts. Time is money. And so yeah, being able to have the first AD be that kind of speaker of the house where everyone comes to and is flowing through. The little work I've done as a first AD, it's very hard work, but it's very fulfilling work as well.
Absolutely. And again, the devil, so they say, is in the details. And you really need to have a clear understanding of everything, every detail that is in that screenplay, because in addition to being able to understand how you're going to shoot the picture, all of your departments have to budget the picture. So they are budgeting from the document that I'm creating, the shooting schedule, so that they can, again, set up their timeline, set up their manufacturing, set up their manpower. How many people do we know that are we going to need? We may have an extra day where we have, 500, 600 extras. That's not an everyday thing, but the costume department needs to be able to plan for that. They need to bring in additional manpower. Your locations department needs to set up additional catering spaces. Your transportation department needs additional buses or vans to shuttle people in or out. All of these things hinge off of the information that comes out of the screenplay and then into your shooting schedule.
Absolutely. Now, I want to keep going with the collaborative process. Could you speak to the working relationship between an AD, UPM, and a line producer?
With the line producer and our UPM, it's all about making sure that we are managing the budget, managing our days. At the end of every day, my line producer has to call the studio and say, we made our day, we didn't make our day, we're on schedule, we're behind schedule, whatever the case may be. So my relationship, with my line producer, my UPM, is really crucial because, one, they have to trust me that I am doing what is in the best interest of the picture to make sure that we are going to make our days and make our schedule. And then two, I have to be able to provide them with the information they have so that the studio, they can report to the studio that we are accomplishing our goals. We're on schedule, we're on budget. And for us, we just have to have a clear line of communication. They typically know more about the budget than I do. As I like to say, they know where the bodies are buried. If we need some extra money, or where the little stash of cash may be that we may need if I need to build up my extras, or if we need more picture cars or something like that. So my collaboration with them is really crucial. And a lot of times I have to weigh in on whether or not, okay, you said we have to make this picture in 40 days. I don't know if we can make it in 40 days. And these are my reasons why. So if I have that relationship with my producer, and then the producer has to go back to the studio and say, hey, we've done our breakdown, we've done our due diligence, we've done everything we can to schedule this movie, but 40 days doesn't feel realistic. Maybe we need 41 or 42, whatever the case may be. But that's the type of relationship I have to be able to have with my line producer, my unit production manager. They manage the budget, special equipment, additional man days, all of these things. They have to have the information that they need to do their jobs. And I'm just a big part of giving that information.
Has there been any instances in any of your projects where you've had to work with the UPM and or line producer to, solve a problem like that?
Oh, absolutely. I was recently on a project where we had a 42-day shooting schedule. Beautiful shooting schedule. I loved everything about it. The director loved everything about it. When we budgeted the picture and everything came in, all of the department budgets came in, our money only actually fit 38 days of filming. But the director and I knew that there was no way we could accomplish that picture in 38 days. So I worked with my UPM and I said, how many days do I have to hit where I don't go into overtime, or maybe I shoot a shorter day, I shoot a 10-hour day or an 8-hour day. And if I build the schedule in such a way that when we end the movie, all we're doing is potentially our driving work, where we can cut down the number of cast, we cut down the number of crew, we can essentially drive ourselves to smaller and smaller costs. Can we recapture some of these days that have been cut? And we were able to accomplish that. We shot a number of short hours, 10-hour days. We didn't go into our overtime budget quite a bit, and we were able to put 3 days back into the budget. So we got 41 days. We didn't get to 42, but we got close to it, as opposed to being hamstrung and only having 38 days.
That's amazing. I don't know that I could have handled that with such ease.
Well, it's a lot of back and forth. I think the same thing happened when we shot Prisoners. We had a 55-day schedule. We needed 58. We appealed to the producers for the additional 3 days. And, we met them halfway. We figured out a way to do those last 3 days as small as possible. We had gotten all the dramatic scenes done. We had gotten all the big scenes done. And those last 3 days were essentially Jake Gyllenhaal's character, Loki, speeding to the hospital. So I needed my stunt team. I needed my camera team. We were able to cut down our costume department and get as small as possible in order to give us those additional 3 days.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, congrats. The movie turned out well, so I think you did a good job there.
You just have to, you have to be creative. A schedule is a living, breathing entity, and you're managing it constantly. New things are coming up. Your weather's changing. You may have a cast member or crew member, someone essential, get sick or ill or have something go on. So you're constantly managing your schedule from the top of the day to the end of the day, and looking forward as much as possible.
Now, I wanted to go back into the pre-production process and talk about tech scouting a little bit. Could you describe the general process of tech scouting and what you're looking for specifically?
Once you get out to the tech scouting portion of your prep period, you've already gotten to the point where you've shot listed, you've storyboarded, you've selected those locations. Ideally, your director of photography have gone out and actually worked in that location and shot listed and understood everything about it. So when you get to the tech scout, you have everybody there, your grip departments there, your gaffers there. You have all of your department heads, and you are literally walking through that location, the shooting that's going to take place at that location. So what you're looking at are, what are your sight lines? Where is it okay to put equipment? Where are we going to light from? How much cable are the electricians are going to have to lay? How much prep will the art department need? Are they going to paint this wall? Are we going to shoot this set as it exists? Are we going to redress it? So all of those things are being, addressed on the technical survey, but it's really about the specific details. We're looking this way. You can park the equipment over there. The generator needs to go around the corner. Base camp's going to be 2 blocks down on the left. And that's where all of your departments are getting their information. The base camp's 2 blocks down on the left. I might need some additional shuttle vans. Catering's going to be set up over here. It's a busy street. We're working with our police officers. Maybe we're going to have some traffic lockups. So when you're there for the technical survey, you are literally, without camera, you are walking through your shooting day. Some directors will actually walk you through the shots that they're going to do. on that day, so you have a full understanding, and others may not. And it's all a matter of what the director is comfortable with at that point in time. There may be more work that needs to be developed. We know that we're going to shoot this location, but the director doesn't want to hit himself or herself into committing to anything just yet.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. Now, could you give me your definition of what a script breakdown is?
But the screenplay breakdown is you are going in and you are literally pulling out every element of that picture, your cast, your background, your props, animals, picture cars, because every one of those elements has a cost associated to it. So you're going in and again, you're picking all of these things out that you need to account for. There may be visual effects work. So you're working with your visual effects supervisor in terms of, what plate shots they may need. You may need to shoot aerial plates. There's just a whole slew of things that come out of, the information that you're exchanging with these departments during that time period.
Could you briefly describe, I'm sure it's a longer process, but could you briefly describe your process of breaking down a script?
It's interesting. When I first started as an AD, and I asked my mentor at the time about how do you break down a screenplay, he actually pointed me to a book. Is written by, I don't remember the author's first name. Last name is Singleton, and it literally tells you how to break down a screenplay. But, yeah, and you're essentially, you go in and you color code. When you're first starting out, you're very deliberate. It's a very deliberative process. So I think I had sent in my highlighter colors for Brent, and you can see how I use the highlighters to highlight different things. So my green highlighter, I go in and I highlight all of the cast. Very important. You have to have all of your cast accounted for. You can't, get there on the shooting day and go, oh, I forgot such and such was in this scene, whatever the case may be. So I go in and I'm pulling out the cast. Then I go back in and I pull out all the extras because we have to do an extras breakdown. Then I'm pulling out all my picture cars. I'm probably using purple highlighter for my picture cards. I'm using pink highlighters for my hair and makeup, because again, there may be a fight in the picture and you have to track how badly is this person injured and how long do these bruises play? Because part of your process is also, as you're breaking down the screenplay, you're determining how many story days they are. You collaborate with your script supervisor, you talk to your director. Some stories may take place over 2 days. Some stories may take place over 15 years. So you have to be able to know your days. You have to be able to map out your costume changes, your look changes. So again, as you're going through and breaking it down, you are just accounting for every detail that is in that screenplay.
Got it. And do you find there are any scenes that are harder to break down than others? I would imagine, special effects heavy or something along those lines.
Action scenes tend to be a little bit more difficult, simply because a lot of times they're just written as a big block of this is happening, and then they're doing that, and then they're doing this, and then they're here. And within that big block of action, a location may change. They may be fighting outdoors, and boom, they crash the window, and now they're indoors. The fight can take them up several flights, whatever the case may be. So as this is going on, there's a lot of layers that you have to track. If you look at one fight scene as 3 acts, what happens in the first act, what happens in the second act, what happens in the final act, maybe this person gets a cut in the first act, tracks through to the second, all the way through to the third. Again, there's so many layers to what is going on in an action sequence. A car chase, when does the car get damaged? You have to manage the continuity of the damage. If you're not shooting that car chase in one continuous block of time, you have to be able to make sure that you're matching. So there's all sorts of complexities into action sequences.
Definitely. Yeah, I always tell people to look out for those hidden elements.
Absolutely.
The script may say he's writing on a paper. It never says he's writing with a pen, but he's got to be writing with something.
Absolutely. And that's exactly, what I talk about when I talk about layers, because some screenplays are very dense. You may go through the screenplay 2 to 3 times, and every time you go through, you're discovering something else. A lot of the process is also tracking your cast, because you may have a minor character that doesn't have any dialogue who is, say, somebody's sidekick. It's like, is that person here then? Is that person here then? And those characters are hard to track sometimes if they don't have dialogue until certain points in time. So you're working with the director. I'll go through a full, page turn essentially with the director, with my screenplay that I've marked up with the questions, to get those kind of questions answered. Do we see him? Do we see her? Whatever the case may be. So that, again, once we get there on the shooting day, everyone knows who's in the scene, what we're going to accomplish, and nobody and nothing is left behind.
Absolutely. All right. Now, moving on from, the breakdown, I want to go into the shooting schedule. Do you have any basic tenets whenever you're scheduling a shoot?
And the most basic is typically you start with your day exteriors or night exteriors if your show takes place primarily at night. But you want to start with your exteriors, and you want to end on stage. That, again, allows you to start big, get smaller, control your costs, but you also need to be able to have cover sets. So, for instance, if you were to start on stage and then put all your exterior work at the end of the schedule, if you got a rainy day, you have no cover to go to. So you want to, lay out your exterior sets, know what your cover sets are for those exterior sets. Hopefully you never have to shoot them, but you always have to protect yourself, protect the company, so that you have somewhere to go in case you need to go to your plan B. So again, start with your exteriors, try to finish on stage, and then that's the way you start. And then from that point, that's where the schedule begins to change. You're going to start your casting process. Some of your actors may only be available for certain dates or time periods. Again, some of your locations may only be available for certain dates or time periods. If you want to shoot in a stadium or an arena, you're going to schedule around a sporting event, potentially. So all of that gets factored in as you look at your overall schedule.
Gotcha. Okay. And do you use a stripboard when you're scheduling?
I used to use I actually started when the strip boards were cardboard, and then I went through the transition where they were plastic with the strip perf, which was an absolute nightmare. And now it's all done pretty much electronically, but I will lay my board out. Like you see here, I have my felt wall behind me, and I sent Brent actually a copy of one of my boards that I do, and I lay it out in a week by week basis so I can stand back and I can look at the entire schedule for the picture. And that gives me the opportunity to, have meetings around my board, have discussions. People can come up and examine, ask questions, and again, during your pre-production process, your board may change numerous times. You may even have an alternate version of a board. For instance, on 2049, we had 2 boards working. I had one board where we were going to do all of the work in Budapest, and then I had a second board where we were potentially going to go to Malta at the end of the schedule for the tank work. Well, it turns out it was less expensive for us to build our own tank in Budapest than to have to move the entire company to Malta. Plus, there were weather considerations. So I had to work both of those boards at the same time until we could finally reach that decision that, hey, we're going to build our own tank. So up until that point, I may have had 5 or 6 different boards working.
Could you kind of talk, the differences or pros and cons between scheduling a big budget studio film versus a low budget indie film?
Oh, wow. It's interesting because whether you're doing a big budget or a small budget, everyone always feels, if I only had X amount more days. Again, the smaller independent probably doesn't have as many complexities, or you may not have as many departments. For instance, you may not have a visual effects department. So, you don't have to take those sort of considerations in. Whereas on a larger budget movie, a Marvel or a DC project, you have tons of visual effects. So, you are, in addition to having previs that showing you certain sequences and heavy storyboarding that you're going to break down, there's just a lot more complexity on a big picture like that. You're going to have more departments. Again, if you are world building and you are fabricating your own clothes and your own props and your own cars, it's just a much bigger sort of ordeal. On a smaller independent, again, you may be more streamlined. It might be a little bit more streamlined storytelling. Again, you may not have visual effects. You're not fabricating cars. You're trying to find cars that exist that fit the time period, or whatever the look may be for the picture. It really has to do with the primary difference is how many people you have to communicate with on a smaller picture as opposed to a larger picture, because you're going to have so many more departments on a larger picture that shoots for a longer period of time than you're going to have on a smaller, low budget picture.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Totally makes sense. Are there any of your previous work that you were working on that you found very difficult to schedule?
You always have certain degree of complexities in there. And again, your parameters are always going to kind of drive things for you. For instance, your actor schedules have a lot to do with it. So once you're casting, you're going to find out, okay, we only have this actor for 2 weeks. It's like, okay, so how do I schedule this person that I only have for this 2-week period? Well, this person interacts with this person that I only have for an 8-week period. So I know I have to have some overlap between those two characters. Again, you get into your parameters. These locations are only available this amount of time. There's all sorts of things that go on. If you're also working with your art directors, because if you're building sets, you have an entire construction schedule. You may have multiple sets being built on the same stage. So I may need to shoot out one set, let the art department go in and strike that set, build the next set, have time to pre-light it, and then go back and shoot the next thing. So you're constantly juggling all of the parameters, all of the needs, all of the details within your shooting schedule to make things match up. And then you may have a situation. I had a picture once where I had just a phenomenal cast, and 3 of them had been nominated for Academy Awards or Golden Globes or whatever the case may be. My director of photography was nominated for an Academy Award the year prior, and they all had in their deals that they could go to these various events. So how do I schedule around the Golden Globes, the Berlin Film Festival, the Academy Awards, whatever the case may be, these things, or, this actor works 9 weeks and he really wants to go home to New York every Friday. So his deal is he only works Monday through Thursday. Friday, he's on a plane, whatever the case may be. All of those things are constantly being added to, the parameters of your schedule, and you're just managing within all of the details and notes that you're getting.
Is there any moments in your work where you've had to rely on some creative problem solving? If you could share what project that might have been on?
Oh, absolutely. One of my favorite moments, the motion picture Prisoners, we spoke about a little bit before. That very last chase scene when Loki, Detective Loki, is driving to the hospital. We're shooting on a major boulevard in Atlanta, and the vision for this particular sequence was that we couldn't afford to light this entire street. So we had to find a street that was lit, and then 2, our director of photography felt that for his lighting, what would be really great would be to have a bunch of cars coming in the opposite direction as our light source. Now, a bunch of cars, a bunch of extras, all of these things cost a lot of money. And we discovered that we couldn't afford the number of cars that we needed for this particular sequence. So I worked with my locations department. I worked with, my second AD, and we figured out a plan on this particular boulevard that we were shooting. It was a major boulevard in Atlanta again. And what we did was we discovered that we could get a traffic engineer at the very end of the run controlling the traffic coming opposite us. So on the eastbound side of the street, we had our stunt team and we had our hero picture cars. And then on the westbound side of the street, I had precision drivers that were there to block driveways from existing businesses and also to block the left turn lane so that none of the cars that weren't actually part of our production wouldn't turn into our path. So once we had the street locked down and everybody in position, the traffic engineer would simply hold the light red for minutes upon it at a time. And then once I had a PA down there, once we got to a certain level of cars, before it backed them to the next intersection, we were ready to go. We started the sequence. The traffic engineer turned the light green, and just hundreds of cars poured over this hill towards us. So we were able to get the lighting that the director of photography wanted. We were able to execute the stunt safely. We had our safety driver set up. We had our stunt driver set up. And if you look at the sequence, you will literally see just 100 cars, headlights back to back to back coming towards us. And they lit the scene for us.
Wow, that is absolutely amazing. That is definitely creative.
Hey, again, you just think about it. If I needed 100 or 200 picture cars for that, the cost would just be astronomical, and we wouldn't have been able to afford to shoot that.
Absolutely. Yeah. That creative thinking, being able to think on your feet, especially on set, everything's happened at, just right then. And just to come up with a plan like that is truly amazing.
Yeah.
Do you have any other examples of any happy accidents on set?
Not off the top of my head, but I love the fact that you use the word happy accident, because sometimes, again, a motion picture is a living, breathing, dynamic sort of entity. And when you're out on set and you're shooting in the natural environment, whether it be daylight or nightlight or airplanes or trains or cars, whatever is in your environment, you're constantly managing that. Shooting in cities like Vancouver or Montreal, Canada, when you go there, they're very much summertime cities. They have very long winters. So in the summertime, those 3 months, they pack in every event you can think of: comedy festivals, jazz festivals, air shows, F1 races. Everything you could think about is packed into that 2 to 3 month period because it's summer. And when you go to a different location to shoot, in addition to having to know about the local holidays, traditions, you also have to take into account, what are these local events? What's going to affect me? And again, that's another parameter that shapes your schedule.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was curious about that. I was just about to ask, is there special considerations that you have to take when, filming out in another country, or, are there different type of permits or anything that you have to get?
It's always, the first thing you want to know are what are the union rules. Some of the unions are covered by very standard agreements. Some have side letter agreements. So my second AD, my unit production manager, and we all sit together and we go, okay, this is the area standard contract that we're working under. Or, you're working in Budapest. These are the holidays. We're not going to observe the American holidays. We're going to observe the Hungarian holidays. All of those things. And then there are the cultural things. In the UK, a lot of the crews only work 10-hour days. You have to ask them for permission for overtime. So again, that's going to dictate how you schedule your movie. Here in the States, we typically schedule our days for 12 hours. But if I'm going to take a 12-hour day and take it overseas where it becomes a 10-hour day, that automatically reshapes the schedule to a certain extent. So again, those are things you're taking into consideration. Again, a lot of the cultural events, you have to respect other people's cultures when you're shooting in their hometown or their state or their country or whatever the case may be, so that, you are considered a good guest, and, you can get the crew, on your side, so to speak, and be able to, again, get the best out of them as you're making the motion picture.
Well, Don, thank you so much for your time. You've given us a tremendous amount of information, so thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
If you're looking for more interviews and deep dives into the StudioBinder software, be sure to like and subscribe to be notified when new videos are added. I'm Brandon with StudioBinder Academy. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.